In your personal opinion, what's the most respected fighting game of all time? There's games that just when they come up, people just automatically have reverence for it. There's certain games that when you hear about it, people just automatically have like they just think of trash automatically. They just think of taking out the trash for the week. So, starting with you guys, it's kind of a straightforward question. What's the most respected, well-renowned, just has a bunch of honor on its name and stuff like that? What game is that comes to your head when you think of fighting games? Starting with you, Mr. Gaming.
Um, I'm probably okay. So it's two games that I'm thinking of, Hmm. and both of them I think are good answers for different reasons, slightly different reasons. Um, two games I got in my head is Street Fighter 2 and Marvel 2, MVC 2. Um, really, Street Fighter to me, I feel like kind of fathered the whole like fighting games as a whole, like the mechanics. It kind of fathered like there was a base for things like to come after it. Marvel 2, it was like the game that was like it was so loved, so respected by so many people. A lot of even me like watching the game, especially when I started watching it competitively, I was just like, yo, these players are doing crazy stuff. And then when I learned how hard it was to do that stuff, I was like, yo. So I think I'm gonna have to give it to MVC two. And to me, it was just like that team dynamic. And then like I said, when I saw how like the competitive was played, I was like, yo, they doing stuff I never even like an infinite. What is an infinite? Like that was my first time seeing that type of stuff. I'm like, yo, this is insane. Like, and a lot of the players that like are good at the game, like they were the top of the top, like they would forever be enshrined in those titles. Is like the uh, Justin Wong, Sanford Kelly, Yipes, all these players. You got even had like some specialists like Video. He was like a Ken Rogue Colossus player, which was like super dope to see play. And he was also pretty good against top tier teams, so it was like dope to see that. And that game, it took a lot of skill. The game took a lot of skill. Games now take skill, but I promise you, like to me, MBC2 was way harder than 3, man. Like you go back and try to do some of this stuff, man. It's like, yo, this is crazy. It's on a whole nother level. Watching how they were like controlling those characters, doing all this fast paced stuff, and like Marvel 3 was a fast paced game. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, and also the execution needs to be there as well. But with MVC2, it was just like if you did not put that time in, like to get even decent, like halfway decent, you weren't even gonna have a thought of touching anybody that was the top of the top. Marvel 3 kind of changed it a little bit. You had X Factor, you had some guy like characters like Virgil. You pop X Factor and you just get a random H slash, and you could take somebody out. But Marvel 2, it wasn't none of that. You had some cheap stuff in that game, but it's like the cheap stuff in that game was so hard to pull off and to perfect and to be able to do it consistently all the time. That I think to me that's what it just like. And also look at MVC2 was on ESPN like for the basketball lineup. Like if that and that spreads beyond just the FGC. Like I think they've done stuff like that for Street Fighter 2. I think I remember seeing, but just that alone, like how iconic that theme song was for the character select screen, how iconic the character select screen itself was, that they would be like, hey, let's take that and put it on the ESPN. Like that's crazy. So I think to me that game is probably for me what I would say is like the most respected. And again, like I said, for me, Street Fighter 2 and those are like really close. But I'm gonna to give it to Marvel because I like Marvel, that style of game and play style more than Street Fighter. So I'm gonna have to give it to MVC2 as being the most respected.
Ooh.
Man, Kid Masters, get out of
Like when I think about the most respected fighting game, like the game that I would say that I respect the most.
Man, speaking into a snow cone.
Oh yeah, I know, right? I had to cool it down, man, after like all that hot fire I spoke earlier, bro. You know what I mean? Like fire and ice, baby. But I think like the thing to me is like I would when I think of a game that I respect, like really, really respect, I would say it's Street Fighter 4, I think. I think Street Fighter 4 specifically, like not like more after like Super Street Fighter 4 and Arcade Edition and stuff, like when they started adding characters like basically the characters from like the Alpha series, like Adon and Guy and Cody, like when they started adding them to the game, you know, I feel like, you know, a lot of people say that like, you know, like Mr. Gaming Lift said earlier, you know, it's kind of like Street Fighter 2 kind of was you know, kind of was like, you know, started it all. I feel like Street Fighter 4 kind of reinvigorated like the fight of the FGC in general. I feel like that's a game that kind of really brought a lot of attention to the FGC. I feel like a lot of people like there were a lot of really great players who got their start there. Like a lot of people, like I remember like some people's names who I'd never heard before that I heard all the time, like when Street Fighter 4 was going on, like Punko, Justin Wong, Gamerby, you know, like all these people who I'd never heard of before, like coming out, going to majors, making spectacles on online, went on stage. I remember when Punko went on stage and he's like, he drinks the can, throws the can down, and he just completely dominates with Seth. I was like, bro, that was cool, bro. Like, I mean, you had Justin Wong talking about how useless Adon was, and then he gets like smacked up by Gamer B later on. That was pretty cool, man. I thoroughly enjoyed that because I'm an Adon fan, and I don't like to hear anybody talk bad about my man. You know what I'm saying? Like he is the Muay Thai god, bro. Like let's be honest. So, yeah, man. Like whenever, like, but I mean, like I feel like that game and like, you know, is just like a game that not only like deserves a lot of respect because it did so much for the FGC, like not like very recently. It's not like it was like what was it, like 10 years ago? I think it was like around 10 years ago, a little bit over 10 years ago when Street Fighter 4 came out. I think it was like 2008, maybe 2009, I think. And then of course, like every time, it's like one of those games that just felt like it got better and better and better every time they added on a new version. It was like Street Fighter 4, then Street Fighter 4, like, you know, Super Street Fighter 4, then like Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, you know, and then we had Ultra Street Fighter 4, which was like, you know, pretty much like the definitive at that point version of Street Fighter 4. And I mean, like, people loved it. I mean, I didn't buy Ultra Street Fighter 4 because I was a broke boy at that point. But, you know, like I remember watching people having a whole lot of fun. They had Poison in the game and Elena, Hugo, you know, I mean, all these characters. I mean, it was a really big roster. And I mean, I feel like, yeah, that was like probably one of the best Street Fighter games, if not the best Street Fighter game to come out like in a hot minute, you know? So yeah, I would have to say that just without it, like just off the top of my head, I would probably say that the game that I respect the most would be Street Fighter 4. Now, the thing is, like, when it first came out, like vanilla Street Fighter 4, I was kind of like, oh, well, this is okay. But you know, I mean, because like the only character they had in the game that I liked was Dan. But I think yeah, for like most of the time, I would probably say that, yeah, man, the most respected game to me is Street Fighter 4.
To answer this question, to be honest with you, I was going to take MC's answer and say Street Fighter 4, but to not be redundant, I want to take a different angle. So for me, obviously, like we spoke earlier, I'm more of a Mortal Kombat guy. I think when it comes to the most respected fighting games of a community, it depends on different communities, which ones were the pinnacle of that era, or the game that kind of kicked it off and made them what they are. When I think of the Tekken community, I think of Tekken 3 and the respect that game had. I even think about playing Tekken 3 for the first time. At least I feel like it. It's probably not true, but I feel like that was the first fighting game that really got embraced by like the Black community as a whole. Because I remember like before that, people would play Street Fighter here and there, people would play Mortal Kombat here and there, but everybody had Tekken. When Tekken 3 came out, everybody was playing Tekken, I remember, as a kid. My older brother was a grown man, didn't have a console, and he came to my house and played Tekken every day. And I think that was one of the first times that people of our generation in the 90s got a hold of a fighting game and learned more complex mechanics because the combo system was unique. And not only was it a great game mechanically, it brought together great visuals, really enhanced visuals from Tekken 2, really stepped it up, great audio, and great gameplay. So for Tekken, I think Tekken 3. For Street Fighter, obviously, Third Strike to me competitively seems it's retrofitted, because I think back then people didn't say the same thing, but retrofittedly, people seem to respect Third Strike the most. It has this reverence almost. I think the Evo moment with Daigo and Justin Wong, of course, has a lot to do with that. And the competitive scene around that, people really like that game. However, I agree with MC Amazing with Street Fighter. Street Fighter 4 brought an entire new generation of fighting games. It brought fighting games to another level. Let's just be honest. It opened the floodgates because it was the right time. More information came out online. YouTube became a thing. Twitch became a thing. Evo became widely viewed by a larger audience. And all these things came at the same time that Street Fighter 4 was heating its popularity. So as a result, it became kind of the standard at the end of these tournaments we used to see all the time. At the end of all these Evos, at the last game of the night, Street Fighter 4, over and over again. And it was so great to watch competitors back then, because I was so many more character specialists. It felt like everybody had a character they were just, you just thought of them immediately. Snake Eyes, you think of Zangief. Gamer B and Adon. Tokido and Akuma.
Who was the dude who used to play Hakan a lot? I forgot. Oil King. Was it Oil King that played Hakan a lot in Street Fighter 4?
It might have been him.
I think there was a few. The one that I remember most of was a guy from Tennessee named what was that guy's name? It was something weird, but he was like, I think, the pioneer kind of the Hakan, but nobody knew about him until he started going to tournaments. I forgot that guy's name, but I think Oil King played him too, though.
Right. But yeah, I remember just the advent of Street Fighter 4 really brought the FGC to another level. So its respect is grounded. There's no way around it. You can disrespect and say how trash it was all you want to. You probably wouldn't be playing fighting games like you are now if it wasn't for Street Fighter 4, whether you want to admit it or not. A lot of people, for a lot of us, the 09ers, I'm an 09er. I'm going to be honest about that. I didn't play fighting games competitively like that until Street Fighter 4 came out. And of course, for the MK community, MK9 really brought us to another level, because we really didn't really have a real fighting game community. We had people who played Trilogy competitively, who played 3D games competitively, but it was very niche. When MK9 came out, I remember it like it was yesterday. It was like a whole new world of players came out. A lot of innovators, a lot of really popular players. Of course, remember the two Evo run of Perfect Legend. Sonic Fox, his reign of terror in NRS started with MK9. He won the last time MK9 was at Evo, he won. And then moved on to the next games, Injustice and MKX and MK11. But I remember how big of a deal that game was, because as a fan of MK, it was nice to have a game that had enough competitive mechanics. You know, people still kind of treat MK like it's its own thing. It's kind of always been blacklisted a little bit by the fighting game community. I think we can admit that. That's like people who like MK and a large part of the fighting game community acts like it doesn't even exist. But for me, playing MK9 made me enjoy fighting games again after I had basically stopped playing for a very long time. And for that, it will always have my respect. And the fact that we still have a fighting game community, NRS scene at all, is because of that game. So it has a lot of respect in that community as well. For a lot of people who didn't really like MK11, the direction it went, or they liked MKX, but they didn't like the misbalancing of it, MK9 was like the sweet spot. It had its top tiers, it had terrible online, but the base game was fun, and the competitive community was growing. And at the beginning of a competitive community, there's nothing like it. When it's hit its grassroots, there's nothing in between. There's not a whole lot of money involved. That's when you have hungry players just playing at the top of their level. And I loved it. So that era will always have my respect as well.